everyone, and welcome back to the final episode of Archipelagic Audio Club. I'm Sophia, and once more, I have with me our co-founder of the Motley Kolektif, researcher and curator Kai. Welcome back, Kai!
Woohoo! I'm back!
Yay!
Hi everyone, it's good to be back. And well, here's to wishing everyone a happy new year. Hope the start of your year is amazing and wonderful, and yeah.
Yes, it's only the first day of the year, but yes, happy new year for me too. And as this is the last episode of our podcast, not only will we be doing a sum up of highlights from the previous episodes, we also have a bonus feature for you, and it's a final book discussion of Amanda Lee Ko's Sister Snake as archipelagic fiction.
Woohoo!
If you haven't heard about this, it's perfectly fine because no one actually knew about this. In fact, we didn't know about this either.
Yes, yeah.
And it just so happened that Kai and I both finished reading this book. In fact, we finished reading this book as well, but we couldn't get her back to the final episode, unfortunately.
Oh man, maybe we can have like a personal chat. Yeah.
Personal chat, yes.
Chat on this.
Another podcast episode, maybe not.
Anyways, it feels like a great novel to end the year, especially to sum up our AAC discussions, right? Because I think Sister Snake takes us from this busy, dynamic, vibrant city of New York to like the surprising and sometimes dark underbelly of Singapore society, which also includes the elite and the powerful in Singapore society.
Additionally, through the book, we get glimpses of many other parts of the world, and through history as well. You have scenes from the Victorian age, even, and this is my favorite, the misty, almost magical world of Hangzhou, where the two sister snakes in the book are born and first turn into humans. In fact, this follows the original legend of the white snake. It's such a hugely wonderful and fantastically imagined book with so many memorable scenes that I kind of read it all in one sitting. How about you, Kai?
Oh my god, it was gripping. I couldn't put the book down. I genuinely could not put the book down.
So for those of you who have not read Ko's Sister Snake, look, we've tried our very best through all the episodes to avoid spoilers, but we kind of desperately want to talk about this book. So
we do.
If you haven't read the book and plan to pick it up sometime in 2026, skip to the middle of the podcast like now. And not just about the spoilers, we will also be discussing some rather sensitive topics that were raised in Ko's book as well.
Yeah, so if you'd like to avoid that and not listen to that, you can just skip to the middle of the podcast.
Skip to the middle of the podcast. Also, very exciting sum up, so you're not missing anything because we will also be talking about exciting things.
Yes.
20 minutes from now.
Right. Yes.
Okay, so now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's begin with a very short reading of the first 2 pages of Sister Snake. Amanda Lee Ko's Sister Snake. Before they had legs, they had tails. This was way back when. For the bustle of data in doom scrolling. For the inception of the steam engine and the stock exchange. This was more than 1,000 years ago, under a majestic weeping willow, whose hollowed trunk was home to an inseparable pair of snakes, who had sworn to be sisters. One pure white, the other jewel green. The willow tree afforded the 2 snakes an unparalleled view of the famed West Snake in their hometown of Hangzhou, the garden metropolis feted as the most beautiful city in all of China. But even a beguiling paradise grows drier than dust. You can't have what you want. A hot kernel of desire was ripening under the cool scales of the white snake. She wanted so badly to be human. She had spent many a morning slithering under the viaducts of West Snake. Broken bridge which is not broken, long bridge which is not long, where scholar poets liked to practice their speeches and amorous lovers stopped to Copperfield. You may be disappointed, the green snake signed with a forked tongue, as the sister gazed wanly at passers-by crossing the bridge. At their core, humans and animals are not so different. Don't you want to see well enough to read a scroll? The white snake asked. To have a wrist you can slip a jade bracelet onto. To have a name and hear your lover sigh it in your ear. The green snake was satisfied with their way of life, as long as she had the white snake with her. Every skin had its pleasures. She loved the freedom of flexing her spine, the clarity of existing as one sinuous length, unencumbered by clumsy limbs. The thrill of the chase, how fierce she felt when they hunted side by side, the lush ripple of spring grass along her underside. But she knew how much her sister desired to be human, and she would try anything once. And so that fateful mid-autumn night, when the moon was at its brightest in the year 815 in the Tang dynasty, the green snake swam to an underwater cave and obtained a lilac lotus sewn by the hand of a great goddess. Happy mid-autumn, the green snake signed jauntily as she presented the seeds. May you rise up along life's ladder. The white snake stared in sheer disbelief. It wasn't just a rumor. Only one way to find out. The green snake split the seeds. Tails touching, they swallowed. Before they slid into the lake to begin their transformation, the green snake looked into the white snake's eyes and signed to her. This body itself is emptiness. Emptiness itself is this body.
Alright, thank you Sophia for the reading of that short excerpt from the start of the book. So as a short summary, Sister Snake is a novel about two sisters that are also snakes. One in New York and one in Singapore, and they are both bound by this ancient secret and also by fate. So while Sue leads a sheltered, moneyed life as the picture-perfect wife of a conservative politician in Singapore, Emerald lives out her immortal days with wild abandon, sometimes as a sugar baby, to rich men, in order to thrive in the streets of New York.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kai. So let's begin with which archipelagic aspects of the novel that we both found interesting, both or individually. I guess we can decide.
So what do you find interesting from this book?
Okay. The one thing that I really found really interesting, and I found Ko did it so brilliantly well, would be how she handled the fluidity of forms in the novel.
Right.
It could be in terms of gender, or for me, a particular favorite is the way that she handled the human and snake connection between the two sisters. And I liked it how the changes, right, of the two sisters being in different skins, there's actually a kind of momentum to it, and it kind of builds up to the final scene, which is actually my favorite scene in the entire novel. For me, there were some key scenes, and I'll start with the first one. So the first scene, where you have the human and snake connection kind of like done really excellently, will be around page 34. Now this is it's kind of a rather disturbing part of the novel. It's where Sue kind of like, as a snake, okay, she gets assaulted in that sense, but she's a snake, okay? And she's in a mating circle thousands of years ago, and she encounters, I think, 2 to 3 kind of male snakes in that mating circle, and she's kind of like, made a victim of this experience. And I liked how Ko uses language to make it a little bit more grey, put it in a bit of a grey zone, where you're not very sure whether this is Sue as a snake experiencing this as a snake, or is it Sue as a human recalling this this tragic event in her life as a human when she was in a snake form. And I liked the way that Ko handled it, because it forces the reader to take sides, right? Like, are you going to read this as Sue, the human who was put into this situation, or are you going to read this as, it's just a snake behavior, this is just a snake environment, this is what happens. Right or wrong doesn't matter, because it's part of nature, right? So I really like that, and I really like how Ko uses language to make this, to force the reader to kind of take sides. Another scene that I found very convincing was when the two sisters, right, the adopted sisters, Emerald and Sue, they decided that we're going to try to become human, and so they had to, there's this mantra, right, in the book. On page 98, around there. Okay, we're gonna flip again.
There's like those ASMR.
Yes, flipping. Okay, hear that? Okay.
Legitimately flipping it. Yeah.
And the mantra is, and you see this throughout the novel, this body itself is emptiness, emptiness itself is this body.
I love this quote.
Yeah,
I love this quote.
It's wonderful. And it's fitting, right? Because you have to kind of like forget that you're a snake in order to become human. And when you're human, you can't forget that you're a snake.
Yes.
That's what happens throughout the entire novel. And this, the will to self-cultivate actually happens for 800 years. And in the middle of the book, and through the different scenes in the novel, scenes of conflict, of course, you also see the sisters in their half forms, right? And I really love those moments because you as a reader, you kind of have to take sides. Do you want them to turn back to snakes?
Yes.
Because they are more powerful as snakes in some ways, or do you want them to be human because it feels as though it is their hope that they are humans, you know? So do you want to follow their hope or do you want to follow their nature? And I think a reader is forced to, to take sides, and I love that. Okay. But the last scene, which was, I think, the most touching scene for me, for Emerald, I think, was happened at the very end, where she was in her snake form, and is the sense of it is that she is very natural in her human form now. In fact, it's almost natural that she can switch forms easily between snake and human now, and that she was able to step into the sacred temple at the end. I thought it was a very touching scene because she could do it with her own power. It took 800 years, but now she can do it,
and it's a momentous milestone.
For her and for her as a snake, her as a human. I think both, because it feels as though now Emerald, and not just Sue, I think Sue, I'm not sure about Sue at this moment of the novel, but for Emerald at least, it feels as though she can switch skins more easily. But actually throughout the novel, Ko is very clear to show us, the readers, that it actually is a lot of vulnerability involved in switching forms, in choosing a form. Somehow you feel like you want to be both, but it's not as easy. It is 800 years of mantra.
I think there was also some parts of the book where Ko also said that Emerald herself struggles with self-cultivation, that there are times where she broke focus and in chanting the mantra, and she doesn't even get the mantra in the first place. So there's a lot of labor and a lot of discipline in self-cultivating, or in that sense transitioning to another form. So I think we kind of look past that. I think if you want to sort of look at transitioning between forms, between spaces, between places and skins even, there's a lot of effort that goes behind that.
So fluidity, ironically, is not fluid. There's a lot of resistance. There's also a lot of will involved in fluidity, and intention. So that I think is a very archipelagic concept. You have the concept of fluidity, but it's never something smooth. It's never something expected or something to be taken for granted. It's always something that requires labor and will and intention, and that even the decision itself to change from one form to another is a huge decision that it brings with it a lot of danger and risk and almost transgression.
There's also that vulnerability between states, between transition states, because I think towards the end of the novel, where it approaches its climax, where Emerald is sort of that in-between state after she was intoxicated over that liquor, I think. And so there is, you have Tick and her partner sort of trying to figure out how to handle with a half snake, half human situation in their bathroom. And so there's a lot of vulnerability to that, and it's sometimes also open to friends, open to those who are close to them, in that sense, in the intimacy that was shared. So I think even in fluidity, even in our own journey to master fluidity between forms, between skins, I think we also have to acknowledge that there's a lot of vulnerability that we open ourselves up to people who are close to us.
Okay, so that was mine. That was my highlight to this novel. So Kai, which parts of the novel that you
So as an undiscerning reader, I would say for myself, I do agree with like what you mentioned. The fluidity of forms is a strength in this book, and it makes it such an intriguing read. It's so gripping to see not only a tale of two snakes, but a tale of two snakes trying to make their way as humans, trying to reconcile with themselves, resonance of being snakes while being humans. So I think that is an interesting feature of the novel itself. And I think I wanted to just bring up this last episode in the book, where I think it's one of my favorite paragraphs in the book, because it's the part where it's the aftermath of that whole debacle between that bloodshed in the parliamentary meeting. Yeah. And so Emerald wants to bring Sue, her sister, back to Hangzhou.
Yeah.
When the latter couldn't even sort of transition.
She was injured. If I'm not
she's
wrong.
injured, right?
Yeah.
So the only way, or she's about to start her passage back to Hangzhou, and so I'll read probably a paragraph here.
Okay.
So it's at page 244 in my book.
More ASMR.
Yeah. Yeah, so the paragraph goes, a silent, genial reptilian head bobs up in the water, leathery skin, long snout, a saltwater crocodile. And then 3 more. The flotilla of crocodiles guides Emerald and Whitesnake out of Singapore's water, towards the South China Sea. Come on, Jie, she whispers, time to go home. I think this episode itself is very poignant, and it's so delicately described to lay the setting of not only just the relationship and the intimacy between the two sisters, but also there's this also camaraderie of the crocodiles. And I think it's so interesting. I mean, in the book itself, there have been mentions of half animal, human spirits, right? Like the monkey that Emerald was intertwined with at one point of time. But to mention saltwater crocodile, it definitely piqued my interest, because I mean, saltwater crocodiles are indigenous to Malaysia, to this region. So it's also resonant of stories, myth, and also of belief systems here in the region. You know, where there are multiple reports of crocodile attacks in the 1960s that sort of inspired a lot of narratives and stories that comes out from this region. There are also beliefs that some crocodiles hold the spirit of people, and there were subsequently kramats and shrines built to that. And so all these tales of affliction and admiration even is sort of seen and featured in this camaraderie, where the crocodiles are the guides to Emerald's passage back home. And why shouldn't they? They have been indigenous, they have been in the waters at this part of the region, and they will know the ebbs and flows of the water so well. And so it makes sense that the two snakes are guided by the crocodiles themselves. Yeah, so I think that's such a poignant and a moving paragraph to read, and to even see the spirit of the crocodile there. You know, it's so intriguing to me. I think also another part of this episode towards the end of the book that also encapsulate a strength in the way Ko writes is that she has this very punchy, stark way of writing where the sentences or the choreography of sentences are intentional, and it's one that sort of tells you a bit more beyond the meaning that it has. So an example of that would be the next paragraph, where she writes, or Ko writes, 1,000 years ago, the Chinese emperor postulated that the world was carried on a giant turtle's back and sent armadas out to map the 7 seas. Now, American billionaires jizzed up the sky with rockets, jostling for the first space colony. In the end, it is all red dust and mortal lust. There and then, here and now, Bai Zuten and Xiao Jing have each other. I mean, you want to encapsulate the sort of temporalities and spatialities that this duo of snakes, of sisters, have gone through for decades and centuries. And so it's so interesting to see that choreography of sentences and words coming together and sort of in very contrasting manner, where you wouldn't even think about having Chinese emperors in one sentence, and then thinking about American billionaire in a very crass way of saying it too. Yeah, so I think it's definitely the pace of these sentences are intentional, and I think it's sort of the strength in Ko's writing. Yeah,
Indeed.
yeah.
Hey, thank you, Kai, for the lovely discussion on Madeline Ko's Sister Snake. Yay!
Yeah, it's always fun to share our thoughts about the books we've just read, which reminds me of our reading club. Starting of the year, the earlier part of this year. We had the N-Flash reading club.
Yes.
And we also talk about, beyond literary works, we're talking about we were looking at art writings and exhibitions and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
But, we might have more reading clubs in 2026.
We may have, yes.
Yeah, but it's only going to be revealed soon.
Not now.
But, not now. Not now. So.
You gotta stay tuned to our IG to find out.
Yes. But for now, if you haven't read Sister Snake, please do. It's a lovely book that's very gripping, and our discussion barely touches the surface of the book, honestly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please pick it up, because I think end of the year sales, start of the year sales are happening, I'm sure.
Yeah, so everywhere in your local bookstores. Support local bookstores.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
In this segment, we are going to continue with our discussion, but we'll go into some of the highlights of AAC.
Right.
Maybe we can go episode by episode.
Yeah, sure, yes. Let's go.
Okay, I'll begin with the first one. I think we started the podcast with Intan Paramadita's The Wandering.
Right.
And if you haven't picked up the novel yet, please do, because it's such an amazing novel. And one of the things that I loved about the episode, and I loved about talking about the book, is talking about the form that Intan takes in her novel. And the form that she takes is actually the choose your own adventure novel. And you'll probably be more familiar with the form as a young reader, right? You're reading detective fiction. Whodunit, yeah. But as a young reader, I think when you're reading these books, the consequences don't seem quite real. You can always go back. It's only a page long, for example, and then you go back to a page. But in Intan's book, you can go several chapters ahead, and then suddenly you meet a dead end, the end. Okay, and so I suppose some readers might find that a little bit frustrating, but I actually kind of enjoyed it, like reading it all the way to the end, and then kind of discovering that my character has died. And then where did I get back to the page that where I made the wrong move, right? I found that totally enjoyable. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just masochistic, but.
But it's also one way to interrupt the conventional way of reading.
Yes.
Yeah, where the decisions that sometimes you take in a book don't pan out, and so it sort of ends in a character death or a no way out. So the consequences are very real, and it almost sort of forces you to go back a page and revisit your decision again. It reminds me of like a taste of a multiverse in a sense, to explore all the different options. Yeah. And
now that you mention it, I suppose the novel does have that kind of like cinematic quality to it.
Yes, yeah.
It's almost like a Groundhog Day.
Yeah. Where you keep repeating and
the same day.
To get it right. Yeah.
But this one, I would say, I think in Intan's book is not just about. I think it's much deeper and much more wider than that, much more broader than that. Because I think if you play your cards right, and you get to the end of the novel, it's actually a very different story. And I think there are very different stories, whether the whole novel that you read is 50 pages long or 200 pages long. And I love that. I think it's very technical, and I think Intan did a lot of work on it for sure, because they're all very, very different. And I think it creates very different characters as well.
Yes.
Because of how long or how short the stories that you wrote for yourself.
Right.
And I love it. I love how that has panned out in the novel.
Yeah. Also, talking about very real consequences, wasn't it also something that we discussed with Hafiz?
Hafiz?
Yeah, and his retelling of the tale of Senior Costa in episode 2.
You mean the one that he asked us which ending we wanted first?
Yes, yeah. Whether you want the sad ending or the happy ending, and it's only through his positionality as a contemporary researcher in this point of time, to be able to tell you a happy ending or a sad ending to your heart's desires, kind of thing.
That's very interesting. I mean, imagining the storytellers of old, right, who could actually actually decide which ending they tell.
Yeah.
Maybe depending on their listeners, right, or the audience that they have. in the past, I think you wouldn't have things like novels or cinemas. You know, I mean, I'm talking about the ancient past.
Yeah.
So
before the silver screen.
Before the silver, sure. Before books, I don't know. Before education, I don't know. And so the storyteller has a lot of power over the endings that they tell and what would fit in that milieu of the time. Yeah. And I love it how in Hafiz's stories, right? It actually has a lot of research. I remember we talked about that in episode 2 about how much research he actually does for each of his stories.
Yeah, not just archives. He's going through like academic writings even to figure out
in different languages.
Yeah, in different languages. Dedication to craft.
Hafiz Rashid, guys.
Yeah, dedication to craft is unreal. Yeah. You mentioned about his research, right? Which brings me to another feature of that storytelling episode by Hafiz that I liked was that he brought forth a story of behind a ritual, a behavior that I've taken for granted for sure. I'm talking about the whole story of behind kemponan, or the desire to consume or the desire to complete the action after you intend to do so. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously you have to go back to episode 2.
Yes, and then and then you come back to this timestamp. Yeah. So when he talks about how behind this particular word, this etymology, there is the story about a mother who wants to eat skipper's roe but not able to because her children did so, and there are very real consequences to that. And so that is why then we have kemponan, and so you have to complete your actions when you intend to do so. And that, I mean, the act of kemponan itself reminds me also of like this communal sharing of food, right? Hafiz's parents, my parents also sort of talked about that, like when you buy food, buy to share, don't buy for yourself, sort of thing. So and so it never crossed my mind that this communal attitude towards sharing food with other people has a story behind it, an ancient old story that originated from West Kalimantan, Borneo, and it's only from from Hafiz's own research and him telling us this story that I was like, oh my god, there is so much. There's a rich history behind it. Yeah.
Even for the very most simple everyday things, right?
Yeah.
Buying food.
Buying food itself. Yeah.
Lovely. Let's look at. Okay, so that was episode 2. So in episode 3, I think we had Nazri Barawi's edited collection of Malay speculative short stories.
You mean my episode?
Yes. Yes, your episode, guys.
The episode I was talking about Singapura Pura.
Yes.
One of the best speculative fiction anthologies that I've read. Yes.
Yes, I saw your list, yes.
And I think we were talking about Diana Rahim's Transgression and also Noor's Mother Techno.
Yes, I still love that title, by the way.
Very fitting of this time. Is there any highlight that you'd like to talk about?
Okay, for me, I think the highlight of the episode was actually Mother Techno's description of the AI. I think that you mentioned it was a maternal AI, right? And it was created in order to help the main character Siti overcome her grief over her mother, her loss of her mother, if I'm not wrong. And there were scenes where it kind of like it plays with language a bit, because the maternal AI or Mother Techno, right, is able to mimic that kind of language, or mimic the music that the mother kind of listens to or plays, right, or sings. I don't know whether it was sing, but it definitely plays for Siti, and is able to recall it perfectly. Remember we mentioned about that. Now I've been thinking about this idea of language and how mimicry can create something so real. That you so no intimate, longer, it's so intimate that you no longer need the original, right? And I mean, this is happening in our lives right now.
It's not even a future; it's a reality now.
If I'm not wrong, there was this news about how I think social media companies are now trying to create artificial influencers.
Oh,
yes.
Oh my god.
So they're trying to go into the business of creating artificial influencers.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, in order that they can replace influencers, right? And so the biggest influencers now are actually already celebrities. so they don't need those mid-tier, influencers who are kind of like just creating content, because they don't need the influencers to create content anymore, because they can create content by the artificial intelligence. And I mean, this is hot. It's hot off the press, right? I'm not really sure about the research or about the realities of this thing, but it seems so close.
Yeah, I mean, when you have large language models like that, I mean, and systems already sort of geared towards capitalizing human emotions, I'm not surprised. Yeah,
right, that this happens, and so it's like a foreshadowing. It's a foretelling, right?
Yeah.
Mother that of course, for Diana Rahim's transgression, I remember that the last scene of Ulik Mayang, or is inspired by Ulik Mayang, the myth or the legend, and I think a lot of stories from our region, just like Sister Snake, right? They can't help but, speak a little bit about the stories that inspire us in this region. Whether it's through hearsay or through legends or through myths or through...
It's spoke in many tongues. It's resonant of many influences, and it's never sort of pinned in one particular temporality or spatiality. Yeah. I think that's a feature. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I think Najib Barawi's collection, I think, brings it all together nicely.
Yeah. I mean, in this episode also we were talking about fluidity also between genres and forms, whether ghost stories are part of speculative fiction, whether and then taking Nazri's questions at the end of that chapter in Singapura Pura and sort of extending it to Glissant's theory of archipelagic fiction.
Yes, thank you for mentioning Glissant. I completely forgot to mention Glissant. Although this is the last episode of the AAC, and it started with
Glissant. With Glissant. So I think trying to test out the hypothesis as to what is archipelagic fiction and whether is that also similar or aligned to the kind of vernacular of stories that we have. Yeah.
And I think what we've discovered so far in the podcast itself is that there are a lot of things that we can play with, and also a lot of things that we can extend and expand on, not just tied to Edward Glissant's archipelagic thinking, but more than that, and very specific to our region as well. And I think that's the most exciting part about reading things and seeing things through the lens of archipelagic thinking.
Yeah, and then also I think in the process of creating that episode, I also realized that we can also even extend it to the visual art.
For sure.
So I mean, I was talking about Sushi Sulaiman's Kancil Menghadap Beringin, right?
Yes.
So of that particular work, and how that symbol of the banyan tree with its exposed root becomes that source of a cosmological sort of source of knowledge, and being a connector to all kinds of forces and living beings in this earth, and it plays a critical role in our current state of knowledge production. So and then I mean, all that it sort of teaches us also is the sense of humility towards the many realms that we are part of, the many skins that we take on throughout the day even, and to understand that to transition between skins, much like Sister Snake, it is one where we have to cultivate it with a lot of labor, with a lot of understanding, and a lot of understanding also towards vulnerabilities.
That's very interesting. I really like that, and I think we can now talk about the 4th episode.
Yes,
with Hui. And I think in that episode we talked about Hui's book, Baby Revolution, and Nuralia Nurasid's The Gatekeeper.
Right.
Excellent books, both of them. And what were your highlights for this one?
I think it was this one particular question that I'm not sure whether you have said it. You said it before, Hui, or vice versa. But one of you asked, are we living in a monstrous reality, or are we living in a reality amongst monsters?
That sounds intelligent. So it was probably Hui.
Because it really made me think, like, I mean, in a realm of archipelagic fiction where stories sort of float between spaces and time, And so the cornerstones of a particular story, let's say, is the familiarity, right? Like Hui mentions about Singlish becoming a language that's very familiar to her, and it's so something to grab onto as she embarked on Nuralia Nurasid's novel. And then you mentioned the Kampung Kenangan being a setting that is familiar, that you've seen before, right? And so it was something for you to grab onto, to be immersed in this story, even though that this is a setting of this story was set in a
fantasy world,
in a timeline that's far
like 5,000. It's like year 5,000 something. Like
So I was thinking about what then makes stories like speculative fiction or archipelagic fiction in that sense very real to us, and where can we draw that sort of line then to what is real and what is imagined. I think that is a philosophical debate that has been going for, centuries.
Thank you for not asking me to answer the question. Yes.
But it's sort of interesting to take a step further and say that, are we then living in a monstrous reality, or in a reality amongst monsters?
With the way things are going now, sometimes all of us are wondering that question as well.
But also, I think another thing that I like from your conversations with Hui is also the credit going to the writer and the writer's confidence in world building. Because in a lot of speculative fiction, in a lot of fiction in general, you need to, as a writer, I would say, I wouldn't say as a writer, but I would
Kai
say
is a writer.
I would say that there is a lot of confidence in the world that you've built through the languages, to the orchestra of words that you've sort of intertwined together for the reader to be immersed in. And that confidence can be clearly seen in your writing, like in the setting of, even in short stories, when you have like a text count that's of a certain number. So you have to have also confidence in that. I think you guys mentioned about Hui was talking about her ability to be able to incorporate steampunk elements into Bing Bing Revolution to make it dystopic, but at the same time a very possible and very near future, in the sense where we don't have oil and gas, which are finite resources. So these are ecological crises, right? So I think it's so interesting to see that.
I think it's interesting that every writer has a very different way of how they imagine their worlds. So if Nuralia Nurasid's world was a bit more fantasy with the Medusa, sisters, right? And Bing Bing Revolution, you have the dystopic kind of steampunk setting, and then in Sister Snake you have this retelling of the legend of the white snake, but then the green snake also comes along, and it changes the story completely, because it's the skill of imagining this world, imagining the narratives and the story that can come up, and that she can come up with in this wonderful novel. So I love it how different writers have different solutions, and all these different solutions kind of like are informed or are being imagined through the lens of their experiences in this region particularly. And I love that about Southeast Asian writing, and that I think we should just do more of it.
Because a lot of these contemporary retellings of myths are so intriguing in the sense where, we've all known of these myths when we were kids, and we've grown up with it, like the whole story of Sinocosta, or like even the story about Kemponat. It's something that we know to the core, but to have someone come in and revisit that myth or that belief and re-envision it in a contemporary setting, it's magic. It's magic cultivated with a lot of labor and effort, but it is magic. It is magic wielded by writers, from the region,
from around us.
Yay!
I think that's a wrap, and I suppose this is our chance to thank our listeners for your support.
Yes, thank you so much for listening to our ramblings, and more so our special guests and their insightful responses.
So we had Hafiz Rashid, and we had Lu Hui, of course, who was also our team member for 2025, and now it's 2026. But I suppose I will just briefly mention the different works that we spoke about. So we had Intan Paramadita's The Wandering, Hafiz Rashid's The Tale of Senor Costa, Najibah Ravi's edited collection Singapura Pura, with Diana Rahim's Transgression and Noor's Mother Techno, Lu Hui's Bing Bing Revolution, and Nourella Nourasid's The Gatekeeper.
And last but not least, Amanda Ko's Sister Snake. And also, we also discussed various artworks, mainly in that episode with me, where we looked at works by Zarina Muhammad, Fairul Dharma, Sohyun Nuez, The White Snake. The White Snake.
The White Snake.
Yes. And then also, Sohyun Nuez, Sanda Muki Ogress, that was in Disobedient Bodies exhibition earlier this year. Ho Tzu-Nian's One or Several Tigers. I think just Ho Tzu-Nian's artistic oeuvre is amazing. Shushi Sulaiman's Kancil Menghadap Beringin, of course, is one of the works that we talked about in the previous episode.
Yeah. And that's quite a few works in just a few podcast episodes. As we've reached the end, yay! But please stay tuned for more Motley Kolektif activities in 2026.
Yes! More reading clubs, maybe?
Maybe.
Yeah, just teasing. But we hope to see you more in person next year too.
Yeah. And a Happy New Year from us to you.
Yay!